you want to go first, DJ?
Yeah, sure. Mine's not really visual or visible at all. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to show you the app. I'm just going to show you the code a little bit. So really, one thing that we had kind of been talking about for weeks now, it seems like, is just kind of like pulling out logic or functions that are kind of generalized and like don't necessarily need to be inside of each component. And so created a couple of new files, utilities.js, kind of just a catch-all. And then per Rudy's suggestion, another file called configuration.js. And so inside of utilities, we have the normalized item name function. So this is basically taking what the user inputs whenever they add an item and puts it to lowercase, replaces any spaces, extra punctuation, that sort of thing. And so that's where this now lives. We also have our fun 1 day in milliseconds constant that's being sent out now from here. And then also the function to determine whether or not an item has been checked within 24 hours. So that's kind of where that lives. We also definitely caught a bug, I think, because we were like using our current time outside of the functions. And so what that was doing was basically setting up that variable to point to a time that wasn't necessarily accurate. And so I basically just moved current time inside all of the functions where it would be called. So that's going to kind of keep it enclosed there. Inside of our configuration file, we do have our buttons. So all of these different options for soon, kind of soon, not soon, etc. That lives in here now. And then also our fun item status groups. This is how we are filtering different items and giving them different class names based on whether they're inactive, not soon, kind of soon, and all of that. So that lives inside of configuration as well. A couple of other functions I did throw into the Firebase file is also are these two. So anytime we send an item to be updated to the database or deleting, I thought it might just be kind of fun for them to live in here and then import them as well. So yeah, and then again, everything else is just being imported across the different files. And so just kind of cleaned everything up and made things a little bit neater. So that was my task this week. Any questions, thoughts, anything? Shout out to Rudy again for the naming conventions. Definitely appreciate that for sure.
I love what you did, because like for me, the project grows, and then you go, okay, wait, now I know what to refactor. And I just love seeing that. It feels like this like step to the finish line. So it's just exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really good. It looks a lot like, you know, a lot of the projects I've worked on at my current company, at my last company. So like if I were to walk in on a project like this and see the configuration set up like that and you exporting it, like I'd feel right at home. And so that's great. Like, I think you did a really good job with that.
Cool. Let's see, who wants to go next?
I can share next.
Cool.
So I worked with Shelly on this project and we kind of figured out the logic together of our task was to make it so we have some kind of default message if groups are empty. It's not just like an empty box, and people may get confused that are using this application as to why like there's an empty box there. So how we did that and how it's changed recently, I added this filter because it was used multiple times, which is filtering items into the group in the configuration by that return logic. So those arrays get filtered here, and then defined there, and then I call them here to check if the length of that array has items in it that match the group. And if it does, then that array can be mapped into our list items. And if not, it will just display this kind of generic text that there's no items to match that time frame. So what that looks like is these groups have items in them, and then these groups have that generic text when there's no items added into the group. So it just makes it a little bit more clear for users. And I really want to play with the accordion idea. So this code may be refactored and changed over the next 24 hours. I would love to present something at our meeting tomorrow that looks different than this. So looking forward to having the logic figured out so that we can move forward on making it bigger and better. Do you have anything to add, Shelly? Oh, you're muted, just because.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you hit everything. There, all the styling stuff needs to get merged first, and then we can have a free for all tomorrow. Elena, you ready? Or no, wait, did you guys have questions? Okay, Elena.
Great. My turn. So we all decided that a user should have a possibility to uncheck item if he checked it by mistake or just changed his mind. So for this, I had to add to our checkbox a property checked and disabled. So for this one, I used is within 24 hours function, which returns true or false if items was bought in within 24 hours gap, or checked item. So we added checked property to the item when we create it, and it's by default it's set to false. And when we load the list, items list for first time inside use effect, where is it? Okay, inside use effect, we check for this checked if this item should be checked true or unchecked. So if it was bought like within 24 hours gap. So I do this inside use effect. For this one, I created a new item list, empty array, and I push item inside from items list. Inside this a new list array, and set a state. So I had to add a new state for layout items. And also here I found out like we had a bug, or so when we check if item should be active, or so when we set this active to true. So before we send this data to Firebase, anyway, like even it wasn't changed, we anyway send this data to Firebase. So if we add this like condition here inside if statement, so in this case we send to Firebase only if the active property was changed from false to true. And also I had to, like, we didn't have condition if item was active, and if user didn't buy it for amount of time, like it should be set to false now. So we didn't have this, so I added this condition, and we update this data to Firebase. In this case, like if it was active and need to be set to false. So we sent this data to Firebase. So it's something I fixed. And so I had to update handle checkbox function. So now when we check item, this item, it gets inside an array for checked items. So I created an array where we can keep these checked items. So the user can check as many items as he wants. He can uncheck safely. Nothing is like data not sent yet. And after that, when his user clicks a submit button, it calls for another function, submit data to database. In this case, we loop through this checked items array and update that data for each item. So in this case, like this user doesn't have an option to uncheck anymore. So for instance, if I click submit button, So I added success message, like how many items was marked as purchased. This data for these items was updated in Firebase, and these items are being checked for and disabled for 24 hours. Yeah, and array is set to empty array after function ran. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions?
I'm loving, I mean, I wrote this in PR too, but I'm loving how you're using the ECMAScript 6 or, at least modern JavaScript features, like the three dots spread and all that, like very effortlessly. It makes it so much tidier. Like pretty often I'll write a code and then go, wait, this could be cleaned up. But you're just like initially all as modern as possible. So it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, shout out to you, because honestly, this is like a big, like, extra step, I feel like, and you like just solved it really, really well. So this is awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but I didn't do it without you. Like I joined Lindsay and Shelly on Wednesday or Tuesday. Yeah, so got inspired a little bit because I was
Group
stuck.
hangout.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you did the lion's share.
Yeah.
You just bounced ideas.
Yeah, but it was helpful. Oh. Okay, no more questions.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm here to present to you on accessibility. So I will share my screen.
So, Kelly, did you have
what?
You haven't seen
sorry.
it yet.
Oh, Shelly, you didn't
The
go?
design thing. I'll go fast though, because the content,
no.
there's no content
all
there.
of-
It's just pretty.
You
Okay,
can
take
show
all
off the
the
PR
time.
too with screenshots.
Yeah, and the PR that makes I love how Slack picks up the color, because I put the hex colors in just so that we would have them if anybody wanted to copy and paste them, and it actually does it. So I thought that was cute. So this is halfway there. Oops, can you still see it? I just jumped it around. So what I'm really showcasing is the colors, because we still have a long way to go to get it to look the way we want. But I spent my time, again, broad strokes, getting the background into the blue that we wanted, doing a little bit of styling on the buttons so it didn't just look like a whole stream of text. There's still some improvement to be had there. But when you click on the new list, the color stuff is all coordinated. I'm not going to start a new list right now. There's our third color, the pretty yellow, just because I don't want to have that token automatically set. Oh, it's going to do it anyway, isn't it? That's fine. We will get rid of him real quick.
Oh, look at Shelly hacking.
Gotta get.
You just need to play some Hollywood music here. That's like a hacking music.
One of the things we're going to get is to be able to go back to home. That's one of the things for this week, because we don't have that yet. Come on, buddy. Here we go. Okay, so you can enter the list token, and mine does not match some of the new, it matches the new features, but there's some weird things, just as a warning. Let's get rid of that. He's not pretty. So now we've changed the color blocks up. Everything right now is is the same. So that's not going to help you see anything, but we got rid of all the excess text that we were using just so that we could see what was going as we were clicking buttons. We wanted to see how it was being updated. So that's gone. The list needs some more styling. Obviously, we're going to go for a table look this week. Again, did some button styling, need to move some things around, but everything looks like a pretty button now. We've got our new font, and I think that's it. Any questions?
And do you want to show off the PR too, or keep it as a surprise?
You really like the PR, huh?
I got this like, oh my God, this is I'm seeing like DJ's refactoring, I'm seeing Elena's code, I'm seeing your PRs, I'm like, this is coming together. It's like so exciting. But you can also keep it as a surprise too.
No, I don't want it to be a surprise. I want to show off. I just have to find it now. There are way too many tabs open. So we're gonna start from scratch. Actually, let's just start from scratch here, since that's already on there.
Oh, hey, GitHub is first. I like that we're important. We're the priority.
Oh, well, you're first on my list because I spend the most time in that one. That just gets bumped up with whatever you're using. But GitHub's always first, of course. Okay, one PR. So this is my pull request, renamed, got all the color things, both the Tailwind color and the hex color that matches in case we want to use it somewhere that Tailwind doesn't like it. So this is sort of what everything looked like before. Our home screen, our welcome screen, our add item, which I forgot to show you, but it's styled a little bit too. And then this one, and that's what it looks like now. So more cohesive, brighter, bolder. There's a shampoo commercial that's running around my head right now. I don't remember what it is, but it's something like that. Brighter, bolder, beautiful. There we go.
Head and shoulders, Shelly's to-do list.
Okay,
Looks
now
great.
we're done, Andrew.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, sorry to jump in on you there, Shelly. It's all looking so good. You know, I haven't really been snooping around the team's projects or anything, so it's kind of my first time seeing yours in at least a few weeks. So it's really fun. Can't wait to see what it looks like next week after another week of dedicated time on the styling and everything. Cool. All right, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share not my whole screen because I have a really big screen, but I'm going to share a portion of my screen.
Humble brag.
Well, yeah, that's it.
I'm projecting this in my yard on trees in Portland.
But I can't just share one window because I'm going to do a little demo later that's going to open up another window. So you should be able to see my slide and a little bit of extra, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, now I'm going to rearrange some windows. Now I'm going to open the chat.
Actually, kind of cool. I didn't know Zoom you can. It didn't know you can share part of the screen. I should probably look into that too.
Yeah, I could move it around. That's not very helpful. So anyway, okay. So my monitor is a 32-inch, 16:9 monitor. Somebody was asking on Twitter about what do we think of the ultra wides, like 38-inch ultra wides and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, like I like to have more vertical screen space personally. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, so we're talking about accessibility. So I don't know how much, you know, I haven't been in your meetings or anything, so I don't know how much this has come up over the course of the project yet. But we'll talk, you know, anyway, we'll talk about web accessibility, what it is, why it's important, and then how to kind of make it better, like how to, you know, make your stuff more accessible. Before we get too far though, I'm going to be using A11Y throughout the presentation. And in case you've seen that before, it's not pronounced ally because these are ones, not L's. It's literally there's 11 letters that are really hard to type and a Y. So people abbreviate it A11Y. So you'll see that throughout the rest of the presentation. But if you see the hashtag A11Y or something on Twitter, they're referring to accessibility. If these were L's, then it would be you're an ally. Or, anyway. Yeah, and it is actually kind of a nice little double meaning there. So what is accessibility? So the sort of dictionary definition, web accessibility is inclusive practice to ensure there are no barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, and socioeconomic restrictions. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So when a site is correctly designed, developed, and edited, in general, users all have equal access to the information and functionality. So, we're trying to, it's basically describing that people with all levels of ability and in different situations will be able to get to your information and use your app relatively equally. So the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, the standards body for the web, they maintain a working group that's dedicated to web accessibility, and they publish standards around this stuff, sometimes called WCAG, W-C-A-G. web content accessibility guidelines. There's different levels of conformance and stuff for that. In the United States, a lot of sites are governed by Section 508, which is Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. This is from the 70s or something, but it happens to apply to digital stuff as well. Other parts of the world have other sort of regulation, governance regimes, or whatever you want to call them, rules and laws around this stuff. So that's a little bit about what it is. So it's basically this inclusive practice, making sure that there are no barriers, so everyone has equal access to information. So you may or may not be aware, some people with disabilities access websites using assistive technologies. So a real common one is screen readers. So if somebody is low vision or blind, they might have software that reads their computer screen to them, including within the web browser. Screen magnifiers is really common. You can, and there's kind of built into, you can kind of bump up the size of things just in the browser. Speech input. So if you might have motor impairment that prevents you from typing or something, you actually might use your voice to give the computer commands. Assistive keyboards. There's one called a sip and puff. So the person, quadriplegics, sometimes use these where they have a tube up to their mouth and they literally draw breath in and blow breath out in order to control a cursor moving around and clicking on things on the screen. You can see how some of these technologies, if you don't make your stuff easy to use, it's going to be really hard for somebody using some of these technologies to use your apps and stuff. And then Braille displays is another cool one where instead of a screen reader, it's literally a little device that has Braille on it that sort of adjusts on the fly to read the page to the person. So popular screen readers on Windows, the two most popular are NVDA, which is free, and JAWS, which is really good but costs a lot of money. And then VoiceOver, which is built into macOS. So these are all three of those that's software that reads your computer screen to you, reads your web browser to you. So why do we pay attention to accessibility? It's kind of the right thing to do, right? Like, the whole web was founded on this kind of like open information. Everyone should sort of have equitable access to information. But you also may be legally obligated to make your website accessible. So I can't remember what I linked to here, but okay, there's stuff about laws around the world. Lots of companies and governments and things have been sued over the lack of accessibility of their websites. Plus, like, just in the US, more people access websites with assistive technology than everyone who lives in Canada. So it's not a small group of people. Some people think it's up to 20% of the visitors to your website have some sort of disability. And then the other kind of like business argument that you can make if find yourself at a company that's maybe dragging their feet is that you make things accessible and it helps everybody. So the classic example of this in the real world is curb cuts. So, sidewalks at the corner, they have the curb cuts for wheelchair users to be able to get down or whatever. But, a parent with a stroller, it helps them too. Or, an older person who maybe they can't walk as well. Like, everyone benefits from having this kind of these accessible technologies. And that's true for the web too. So things like, buttons that are a little bit bigger, easier to hit for me, as well as my 85-year-old dad, right? So, or bigger text or whatever the things are. So lots of reasons why we should do it. And then the other part of the why is that, and this is from Microsoft, they actually do some really nice work around inclusive design. And they came up with this sort of persona spectrum. So we often think of, like there's a blind person or a deaf person or something like that. But all of us might find ourselves in these categories either on a temporary basis or even a situational basis. So even if you don't live with a disability kind of all the time, you may like if you're a bartender, like you can't hear things because it's a noisy environment, or you may break your arm or something and have to, instead of using your dominant arm, use your other one to use the mouse or something, right? So kind of lose some mobility there. So this is the point of this is just to kind of build a little empathy for the fact that we're not so special. Like any one of us at any time could either temporarily or have some kind of disability that makes it harder for us to access the web. So we should just take that into account and kind of build this in for everybody. I know as I get older, my eyesight gets worse. And so this is kind of near and dear to me too. Like websites that don't adjust well when I bump the fonts up, and like, oh, come on, man. Like just make it work. All right. And then you may be wondering how. So these are some just kind of simple best practices to get you started on this. There's a lot to know around accessibility and how to make things truly accessible and inclusive and everything. But if you follow these 7 things, you're off to a better start than a lot of websites. So the first one is just to use valid semantic HTML. So at Zapier a few years ago, my team built a page and it had three little headlines and then a little arrow thing where you'd hit the arrow and it would drop down some more information, right? Like a pretty common pattern. And we built this thing, and then we contracted with this company that has accessibility testers, like people in the disability community who tested the page. And he was on a screen reader. He got to that point and he's like, there seems to be something here, but I can't interact with it. We're like, oh, okay. And he suggests that we use a details element, a built-in HTML element that basically gives you that functionality. And we replaced these with those. He came back and tested it, and they all worked perfectly without us having to think through all the different states of, it has to be able to focus, and you hit space and it opens, and then it announces that it's open. Like all that stuff you get for free because it's a built-in HTML tag. So super important. That's the bedrock of all accessibility efforts, is just to use semantic HTML wherever you can. Another pretty basic one that most people seem to know is just that you should always have an alt attribute on your image tags. I think React probably even complains if you don't do that. I think it's much more nuanced conversation to say what it should be in the alt attribute, but every image should have one. So there are cases where the alt attribute should be blank, and then there are sort of there's kind of best practices around what you should say in the alt attribute, depending on what the image is, its purpose on the page, and that kind of thing. There are these things called ARIA attributes. I've still to this day I have no idea how to pronounce that, but accessible rich internet applications is what that stands for. And it's if you tried to find a semantic element and you couldn't find one, and you need something that describes the role of the thing or gives it a label or something for screen readers, you can use these ARIA attributes. As this engineering manager from the New York Times said, the best ARIA is no ARIA. Like, use semantic HTML whenever you can, but it is a tool that you can use to sort of enhance things if there's no good built-in tag for whatever you're coding up. Another kind of table stakes thing, which I mean, it's just something that like really needs to be in place, is just that all content is reachable by the keyboard. You can get to everything by tabbing through the page. This is another thing where one of the testers, just like got to a point and was stuck. Like, he literally couldn't get to the thing, and so it literally didn't exist to him on a screen reader. So, if you can't get to everything via keyboard, it's not going to work in a screen reader. If you can get to it with a keyboard, it might work in a screen reader, but it's sort of the keyboard access is a prerequisite to things working on a screen reader. Another thing that makes for a better experience is just to make sure that all the content and the tab ordering of through the content makes sense. So we'll see an example here. I have target.com queued up to do a little demo. Just make sure that things sort of if you were to kind of tab through the whole page, that it makes sense, sort of the flow of the information. So if you have like a news article or something, you'd want the headline first and then the content of the article, right? So but it's absolutely possible to show it that way visually, but have those things be reversed. Another thing is to use sufficient color contrast. I actually kind of suspected this color on the white is not sufficient contrast, but not for 100% sure. So color contrast is important for people, again, with low vision. There are different rules around it. The smaller the text is, the higher the contrast you need. If it's a big blocky headline, you can get away with lower contrast, but there are ratios and stuff that are well known and published that you can you can look at to see if you're meeting those guidelines. Then the other thing is not to only use color to signify state. So, with your list, you have the soons, the kind of soons, and the not soons. If you were only using color to sort of convey those concepts, that's probably not great for somebody who's colorblind, as an example. So you want to make sure you have actual labels that describe the different states as well. Any questions about that stuff? How much of this is stuff that you're aware of or had maybe heard mentioned, or maybe you're familiar with from, I don't know if like boot camps cover this stuff in much depth? Or...
They cover it lightly.
Yeah.
So there's definitely room for more.
Yeah, same here. Just a little bit information.
Yeah, sure. It's very common. Okay. And yeah, the ARIA attributes, they're not bad. I mean, they're a tool in the tool belt, right? But they should be, you should prefer semantic HTML over using ARIA attributes. All right, and then another how. So those are all sort of things you should do in the course of development. But if you get into a job and you're working on a big complex application and lots of people committing code and pushing stuff out, you can build in some level of checking into your, it's called CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous deploy pipelines and things. So there's this tool called Axe, made by DQ, who's a big accessibility consulting company. It's free and open source, and it does what's called static analysis of your code. So it'll look at an image tag, and if there's no alt attribute, it'll say, hey, there needs to be an alt attribute. But it only, the common number that's thrown around is it only catches about 30% of the issues, because the thing that Axe can't do is tell you what should be in the alt attribute, right? Like doesn't have any way of understanding what the image is or what its purpose is on the page. So it can't tell you what to write there. Although that may be coming in the near future with more AI or something. But for now, these tools really can't do that for you. So they catch the stuff that's sort of, that you can tell from the code itself is wrong, but they can't tell you what a good experience is for somebody on a screen reader or a braille reader or whatever. Sort of the next level up, to me, these are kind of in order of how good a job they do of helping you kind of make your stuff accessible, is guided audits. So we're actually going to use Accessibility Insights. It's a browser extension, and we're going to kind of run it on target.com here in a second. There are other ones too. There are a bunch of these plugins. Accessibility Insights is by Microsoft. I mentioned that they do a good job with inclusive design. So this is just one example, but it's a good one. And then I also mentioned that we hired testers. So the testers that we hired were actually from Fable Tech Labs. They maintain a community of people who use assistive technology every day. So the guy who tested our stuff he's blind. He's been using screen readers for 20 years or something. So there's the thing I didn't include in this list is developers firing up a screen reader and kind of trying to use it themselves as that's okay to do. It's not gonna really harm anything, but it's not gonna be a very realistic portrayal of how usable your page is, because this screen reader software, there are a bunch of tips and tricks built into these things. They group elements, they'll register landmarks, and they follow. You can actually look at an outline view using the headers. There's all these sort of shortcuts that people who use this software all the time will use that you wouldn't necessarily be fluent in or even know about in some cases. So no harm in you firing up VoiceOver or NVDA or something and giving it a go, but much better is to actually hire people with disabilities who are really familiar with the software and have them test your pages. That said, I'm not going to use the screen reader, but we're going to do a little demo here. So here's target.com today. Target.com, I'm sort of picking on them because they were sued over their lack of accessibility of their website, and it's a lot better. They made a lot of progress, but I looked at this earlier with accessibility insights, and there were still some problems that I thought would be interesting to kind of give a little example. Yeah, we'll come back and do some shopping later, Rudy. Accessibility insights gives you sort of 3 options for working through some of these things. The fast pass is really good. So you see it pops up another window. It's scanning for problems, and it found a couple. So we open that up, and it shows, might be a little small. If I bump that up. So I found 2 of the same category of problems. So on this page, there are 2 instances of IDs being duplicated. So class names can be used over and over again, but an ID on an element can only appear on a page once. So that's just kind of a hard rule of web development. And they had a couple of places where they had these things in there twice. So now I clicked on that. So what's going to happen back on this page is it's going to highlight where that's happening. So I kind of gave me the little warning or the little error thing, and I click on that, and it shows me what the violation was. There's some things I can do, like inspect the HTML and whatnot. So that's pretty handy. There's the tab stops. I don't know if I have to turn this off or not, but tab stops. So this is kind of fun too. So I turn that on, and I'm just going to start hitting the tab key on my keyboard. And see, the first thing when you tab onto the page, the first thing that happens is that link wasn't there visually a second ago, but now I've focused on the skip to main content link. So that's a really common technique to allow people to skip over all the the dozens of nav links and all that kind of stuff and get to the content of the page. I hit it again, and it actually changes to skip to footer, which is interesting. I hadn't seen that pattern before. And then as I start tabbing through, it starts showing me visually where things are focused. And so I actually found this a little surprising, that it forces me to go through all of these options before it kind of puts me back onto the main page. And I wasn't sure that was a great experience, but it's going through all the different links here at the top as I tab, and then finally into the content of the page. Some wonkiness with how it kind of reports this, but so yeah, so it's kind of cool, and it's a good way to just kind of see, like, what's the experience if someone's going to just try to use a keyboard to get to everything on the page. I'm already 42 clicks in order to get that spring table setting that I've been so desperate for. So yeah, so if you let's see, little digression, I guess, but like if you're working with designers and they are really up on accessibility stuff, they'll be specifying this for you. So most places that doesn't happen. I'm trying to push the designers that I work with to specify this level of thing. Like, you're the designer, tell me what the interaction should be like. Specify the tab stops for me, and I'll make it happen as the developer. But it shouldn't be up to the developer to figure these things out. That's really, it's the design of the interaction. That's the designer's that's their job. Not that you can't help or have an opinion, but and then these automated checks were things that were sort of definite violations, and then here we have some other things that need review. So there are things that the checker couldn't tell. They might be problems or they might not be problems. And so there's some color contrast things. I'm just going to select that one and go back over here. Okay, so you see it's this kind of purple on pink or whatever the colors those are. Like, that's probably not fully accessible as a color contrast, but it's also big chunky text. So it might be okay. That's why it says needs review. Like, it's the kind of thing a human actually needs to verify. Or you could look at the guidelines and say, like, oh, it's type of a certain size and the color contrast is this, yes or no, it kind of meets the spec. Then another class of violation here, label content mismatch. So like here, the label, ARIA label account menu. But if we go back to the page, it says sign in. So is that okay or not? I mean, that's something, you would kind of need to you might want to flag that with your designer and say like, hey, is that okay? Like if someone comes on here, they can't see it. It says account menu. Is that the same as sign in? Like, should that be the same? Right. So anyway, so that's sort of that's all just FastPass. So that's already a bunch of information that is pretty helpful. If you really want to go for it, you can do the full assessment and you go through step by step and you read the guidance and you decide whether it passes or fails, and you work through all of it. And if you were to work through all of these things, pay attention, follow the links it gives you about all the guidelines and everything, you would come out the other end knowing a lot about accessibility. So definitely it's worth doing at least once on some site just to build up your knowledge, or maybe taking it a piece at a time or something, because there really is a lot there. So I think that's about it. We can shop for Spring Essentials now, Rudy, if you want.
But gee, since I could feel like I could use a fashion advice. You know, you really get me thinking though. I've never seen a screen reader of any of those tools used in person. So even though like we won't be, testing the real cases, it'd just be kind of cool for user empathy to see how those tools are used or try once or twice. It's just bizarre. This is not a part of like basic core web or any development education. Like we actually have to go out of our way to learn more about it.
Elena and
Yeah,
I
I'm wondering.
Spent some time because of our checkboxes. We were trying to figure out, did we really want an ARIA label on every single one saying what it was, what it was for? And so we tested out a screen reader, and it was bad. It was really, really bad.
Yeah, it can get really chatty. It can be misleading sometimes. But then I was going to see if it was possible to just kind of quickly pull up one of Sam's talks, because he's the tester who tested our stuff. And there was this isn't the one, but I saw him give a talk recently where he had the speed of the reading turned way down for him, and it was still I could barely understand it. And then he's like, I'm just going to put it back to the setting I normally use. And it was, it just sounded like, I don't even know, like a machine gun. It was like, and to him, he's been using it so long, he could understand. It's kind of, it's computer speech. And so it's very predictable. So he could actually he could kind of perceive the page just through this kind of like, what to me is like a wall. Yeah. Like a modem sound almost. It was really wild. So, that's why one of us testing with a screen reader is probably not going to be very indicative of the experience of somebody like him who, he's like, he has a setting where he can just read all the links on the page, which is why you don't, link the word here over and over again, right? Because for him, it's just here, 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 here. But yeah, he'll, has all these different ways of kind of quickly understanding the structure of the page and all those things. So, heading level important, articles and sections and all that kind of stuff. Header, footer, main, all that stuff. Any questions? I'll share the slides, and there's some more, links and stuff. I actually I do some work with Assistive Labs, and they actually gave us an account that y'all could use. When Assistive Labs is sort of like browser stack for accessibility, so you could go in through your web browser, and if you're on a Mac, you could test on a Windows machine a screen reader through the web browser without having to set up a VM and install it, all that stuff. So.
Is Just Acts like a way to unit test things for accessibility, or is that something else?
Yeah, there's not currently any good way to do that. But because the problem, so actually in my work with Assistive Labs, I'm learning a lot about this, because the problem is, so you have the browser builds up, like a DOM tree and a CSS DOM tree and all these different things. It also builds up an accessibility tree for the page. So, and it presents that to the screen readers, and it's up to the screen readers to interpret that into speech. And so a lot of you can programmatically get at the accessibility tree, relatively easy. It's not, you have to know how to do it, but you can do that. But that it doesn't necessarily tell you what the end result is going to be for a user. And so, yeah, there's not a good way currently to test the actual how the screen readers behave directly. But it's a problem worth solving for sure. But there are other, there are other automated tools and things that go beyond static analysis, but it just feels like early days and that stuff for whatever reason. But hopefully in a couple of years we're in better shape, the ability to do that.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to know, like, in kind of the day-to-day, if this is something that, because you mentioned like working with designers, like ideally it's something that they can say, this is what needs to happen, and you can implement that as a developer. But yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, do you find that you're going back into things and like editing and like fixing more so than just like building from the ground up, like the top kind of accessibility standards, or how do you, I guess, how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's and it really depends on the organization. So Zapier as an example, like we have, there are plenty of developers, engineers, and designers who are interested and want to do the right thing, have some knowledge, but not enough to like do everything correctly, right? So it is really a big surface area. If you really want to do this stuff really well, it takes a lot of knowledge. There's whole certifications and all this kind of stuff. And we have some people who are working through the certifications. So, yeah, this whole process of like the designer should do it. It's called shifting left. Like you're supposed to shift that responsibility to the left in the process. If it's a left to right kind of process. So so there is like we do a lot of remediation of existing problems. We also try to not create problems in the first place, but it's it's just there are a lot of like whether your product manager wants you to spend time on it, it can be a consideration. And, if the designer doesn't specify it and you don't know about it, then it will slip through the cracks and stuff. I don't know if Eddie, Rudy, Lauren, if you have any experience with this at your jobs, like what's been your experience with kind of building for accessibility?
Yes. Go ahead,
You go
Lauren.
first, Eddie.
I was just going to say it definitely leans a lot on the product manager, right? I worked at a cybersecurity company, and so a lot of our competition did not have high accessibility. There was this belief that, there weren't that many people, in the cybersecurity world that, needed accessibility. And so it definitely wasn't prioritized at all. We started trying to, fit it in where we could, and kind of leaning on what Andrew talked about, like, we're going to do color contrast because, like, here's reasons that even if people don't have like standard kind of accessibility needs that people think of, like, some people are working in the dark and some people have color, can see colors differently and stuff. So finding a way to justify it. But yeah, definitely a lot of places it's an uphill battle. And so then to DJ, your point, it's really if you have to kind of move the company towards the direction of accessibility, there's a lot of like, what's the basic stuff we need to like make sure works across the board first, and then you try to like get the new stuff to be right. But there's like kind of a long tail of getting the old stuff updated.
Yep, super common.
Especially where I am, it could be way better because when you're doing internal tools, usually the feel is, well, let's get it out, and then worry about accessibility, which never happens. And the stuff I'm bringing up is very like ad hoc, so there's no like automated tests or anything. Like for one of the projects, we had somebody who was colorblind, so he was able to test the color scheme, but we were just basically coming up with everything. And I'm kind of aware about, the cognitive accessibility, whatever things. So I'll think about, well, this text isn't very clear on this 5 pages later. You should tell user why they picked the 3 pages before. So, they don't need to remember everything or have to go all the way back. But it's just mostly common sense stuff that makes just things more usable. But I can definitely tell you, like, this, people can go way, way more with this stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, it's often a lot of companies, it's kind of a grassroots thing. Like, developers and designers start to learn about it, and they try to do stuff, and I don't like it. This is what's been happening at Zapier. Like the last 3 years, I've been pushing on this. There's a small group that's grown into like a larger group that's been interested in it, and we finally just this year got an executive sponsor. So our VP of design, oh my gosh, it's so good. She actually did a lot of this work in her last job, and so she's come in and is very supportive and has agreed to like make budget requests for us and like drive a process where we're in the process right now of assessing where we're at in terms of like how far along in our accessibility journey we are across these different dimensions and stuff. So we're actually kind of finally making progress because we have this group of motivated people, plus we have it's both top down and bottom up, right? So yeah, we're really excited about the progress we're making now at Zapier.
What's the certification you mentioned that some people are going through?
Yeah, there's an organization called the IAAP, and they have a couple of certifications. The one that most developers do is the WAS, Web Accessibility Specialist or something like that. So if you search for those terms, you'll find kind of that certification regime. And it's pretty technical, that one, and they'll study for, we had somebody study for a couple months and she didn't get it the first time she took the test. So it's no joke, but even just studying for it, like you'll learn a lot and just do a better job of it. So this is where I'm just making stuff up. That's the other certification for managers. So it's on my list to try to get that certification, but I can't find the time. Cool. What? I don't want to take up all the time. I know you still need to go over your issues for the coming week, so we'll call it a presentation. Stop sharing. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, for sure.
I think mentors were learning as much as mentees in this one.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Well, Andrew, I don't know if you want to stay. Please feel free. Don't feel obligated. But
I'm kind of curious how y'all are self-organizing for this last week. So I might just hang around if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So actually, Shelley, if you want to talk about the issues, since all of the ones that are here are things that you guys organized. So
yes, I was trying to do you proud and have everything ready before. We nominated me as the Lauren for the group, which meant I had to organize, keep us on track, and I think I did a good job. Okay, so let's see. All right, ditch that window. Well, everybody saw the agenda. I saw a lot of dancing on the agenda. So we already have our meetings all figured out. We are going to, I'm going to finish make the draft less rough for styling by tomorrow so that we have a nice, clean, beauty-based 0 to go from. And then we'll work on divvying up all of these things. And I'll share it because I can. So these are all the things that we've come up with. A couple of them are stretch goals, I guess. But let's see, I'll start at the bottom. Those are done, or they will be done. So we need to divvy up the token we talked about today. Some sort of walkthrough or introduction. We didn't talk about that today, so we have to decide if we still want to do that or if we're good with just a little line that's there now. All the token shares, warnings if they're going to delete it. And then there was that other functionality we came up with. I forget where I put it. It's somewhere in there. I already know that Lindsay wants to do the collapse groups function, so nobody else try and do that. It's hers.
Andrew gave me an idea with the details, semantic HTML. So
excellent. I've already given myself most of the design things, except for the home screen. If you guys want to come up with our logo, our picture, what that's going to look like, feel free to search for that. And then we're going to meet tomorrow at 5 to divvy these all up officially and to firm up our schedule. But we are pretty confident that we'll be done by Saturday. And then, you know, we can start merging, tweaking, testing, making sure everything's perfect Saturday afternoon, Sunday if we need to, so we can party next Sunday at our live sync.
And
Did I
you
miss
can almost
anything?
use this as a, you can also use this as a QA or, you know, external testers there too before. If you want, just ping us in Slack.
Sure. Oh,
I'm
you know
just
what's not on
curious.
here? We need to clean up that database.
That's a good
I'll
point.
put it on my to-do list. One more
Is-
thing. We
is
keep saying we
next
have
week-
to do that.
Is
And they
next week
make
everybody, or is it just us again? How are we presenting? I'm curious.
Oh, good question.
We haven't scheduled an all cohort thing, but some people were suggesting it. I don't know if it was this team that was suggesting it, but it'd be fun to like have everybody present to the bigger group or something. We'd have to find a time that works for everyone, which might be a little challenging. But at the very
I guess
least,
we could also
you know,
like. Okay.
I was gonna say record it and kind of post all the, you know, the videos in the channel or something.
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be cool.
And we can also share links with the other teams, right? When everybody's done, like go use our app.
Oh yeah. Use the same token on all the apps and see what happens.
Like if we had like a limited time, it'd be cool to have like other teams give like suggestions and break the app and all that. But that's like a huge, yeah, I would
Like
go that far.
sabotage, like go in and change lines of code in your repo, or
We're more like a free QA, free, you know, testers. Like, you know, other people always find bugs that developers never think about, right?
true.
Well, that looks awesome. You guys are very organized. Nice job, Shelly, and everyone. Cool. I think that's it, unless people have other things they want to add.
Great work, everybody. It's fun to see. Tell you
for
all
sure.
work well together.
Yeah, they were, but like, it seems like they had worked together for a long time their first week. So. Cool.
So tomorrow, 5 Pacific.
Yep, dev meeting.
All right. We'll see you there.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Cool.
Good job, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Great work. See you later.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.